welcome to the Revenue Marketing Report powered by Caliber Mind. Our goal on the RMR is to help marketers move from subject matter experts to strategic business partners. I'm your host, Camela Thompson, and today I'm thrilled to introduce Melissa McCready. Melissa, please introduce yourself.
Hello, and thank you for having me. My name is Melissa McCready. I do a lot of different things. One happens to be consulting on an area that I like to coin as growth operations, which is the next level of revenue operations, helping companies to optimize people, process, technology for the purpose of just not revenue growth, but internal growth and customer growth. So way more focus on the big picture. And then I also run an organization called the Growthops community. And of course, we're focused on that same thing and just trying to bring things to the next level. So Camela, thank you so much for having me. And I look forward to this conversation today.
It is our pleasure. Thank you for coming. And great segue. We had a conversation beforehand, as podcasters do. And we talked a little bit about growth versus revenue ops, but I'd love to dig into that because I think it's so important. I've been a huge fan of revenue ops for a long time, but not in some of the ways that I'm seeing it implemented. So a lot of organizations, they focus strictly on revenue BI, analytics, and they're not integrating and optimizing across the entire go-to-market, including customer success and marketing. So I would just love to dig into that a little more with you.
Definitely an area that I am very passionate about, because what I have seen over time is that revenue operations came out of sales and marketing operations, and customer operations and even channel operations were more afterthoughts, and they still pretty much are, which it needs to change. So revenue ops, a lot of what has happened, I think, is because the word revenue is in there, it's immediately tied to sales, which is great. And sales operations, of course, is absolutely critical. But the problem with that is that puts that as the first word, the focus word. And with that happening, then that is the focus. That's a problem, because the focus should be about growth, and it shouldn't just be internally, like we're here to service ourselves. It should be about the customer. Customer needs to come first. Revenue is a result of customer relationships and loyalty and good marketing and partnerships and your internal team feeling supported. It's so many more things than just revenue. And so I think that's why I have this continued passion with it, is what I see going company to company as a consultant is that people lay the framework and they do a really good job. And then there's a point that they hit, there's just a big obstacle and they can't quite figure out what it is. And it's the silos that are happening, all the things that why revenue operations became a thing was to knock down the silos, to almost re-centralize things and figure that out. The thing I see with that is that that's not a one size fits all. Centralizing something doesn't solve everything. You can have decentralized models where people work extremely well together and don't need to be reporting into the same people. So there's a lot of different areas to focus there to figure out what model is going to work best. But ultimately, at the end of the day, with that focus with revenue operations, the customer has been put at the back end of that. The customer should be at the front end, right? We learn from customers. We learn from making successful sales. We learn from our losses. We learn from our successful marketing campaigns and ones that aren't. So to me, if you're going to be running revenue operations, it should be data-driven, which pretty much it is. But the data to think about needs to be the customer data first, and then working your way backwards. I like to think of it as a top-down model. If you've been organized in a way, or you're an existing business, right? New businesses, that's certainly harder for them to do, but a top-down model, I think that's the way to address it. That works best from what my experiences have seen. I see the companies that are doing that and are focused on the relationships and are focused on the partner relationships and the alliances. Those are the ones that when they are going to market, they're getting the most bang for their buck. They're getting the widest nets cast. They're the ones that tend to be the most successful, because everything they're thinking about, people, process, technology, is taking in mind the customer. So to me, growth is go to market. It's customer focused. You're setting things up in a scalable way, and you're thinking way beyond just one function or two functions in a business. That's what's going to make a huge difference for companies.
I love that. I think sales and marketing are, of course, important, but that mentality of putting them first really starts in the infancy of a company, and then that
Right.
culture kind of sticks around. So, totally understandable. You need to initially get customers in order to grow, but there's nothing better than customer evidence to
Yes.
grow your customer base. I think a lot of marketing organizations neglect to market into their existing customer base and really mine the data and the products that they have. There's so much rich data that
Yeah.
you can build on as a marketer in order to bring the material that they really need to them. So
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Like, I think that's kind of how I always thought of it.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of marketing and not marketing into customers, what can marketers do to better support customers? What kind of mindset should marketing really embrace?
I think the mindset needs to be one that it needs to be audience focused. And when you approach things from the audience and knowing the makeup of that and the segmentation and really understanding those things well about that current customer base, going into any sort of marketing planning is pivotal, right? So I think of if I'm going to do a customer event, I need to know the segments first and foremost and agree that that's the audience that we're there to service, that when we talk to them, it's what's in it for me, for those people going to the conference, so they have something to go back to the office on Monday and be able to do, right? If I focus on what those folks' problems are, right? What is different based on what role they play, what industry differences there might be, geographical differences. If I really focus that, I'm giving them a personalized experience. And I think that we know the more personalized you get, the more effective you are with marketing. And so taking that audience first approach and anything going into whatever you're doing for marketing planning is key. Frankly, it tends to be not something that you have to do every single time that you go into an event to define the audience, right? That should be the basis for everything you're doing across marketing. You're figuring out where we're going to go, double down, what makes more sense, where are we getting more sales out of, or where are we getting more upsells out of, where are we getting more customer engagement, and looking at all those things and flipping that data around quite a bit. I love the word evidence. I think it's just so perfect. It's evidence, right? It's like, this is it. These are the facts. And taking those things in and layering them in ways where when you're going to market, that you're really focused on what's in it for them. To have that mindset, and then also every conversation that starts about what we're going to do, who are the audiences, what are the segments, what's kind of the, not our call to action, what's their call to action, and then how are we going to service that? So that would be my way of doing it.
I like that so much, because when we work with sales to get a target audience, I mean, it's always good to stay in touch with sales. They're interacting with people all the time. Good information to have. However, you have to take into account human bias. So anything super positive or super negative is going to stick in our brains. That's just how we're wired as humans. And looking at our existing customer base can go a really long way in informing how we should be segmenting and who we should be selling to. So
Right.
I just want to echo what you said. That's just amazing. So love it.
I think on that point, it's a validation mark, right?
Yeah.
To me, what's so important is that taking that bias and taking that data and coming into here's the reality of that, and then looking for trends and ways to navigate those conversations differently. I think people get caught up in the, I think this because I talked to the customer. It's like, great, let's look at the data and see what that says as well. And there's a healthy balance there. And if you're able to do that, it also stops kind of that natural tendency that happens between sales and marketing. And we know, it's like, okay, but we both know different. Let's see what we know that's the same, and let's see what we actually know that's different, and see how we address those things. So super important point for validating what reality is.
Yes. And I love, like, humans aren't as rational as we like to give ourselves credit for. We get very emotional. So anytime we have an opportunity to bring the data in there and validate or say, I know you've seen that, but it looks like a few other people in the sales department have experienced something differently. Let's bring them into the conversation.
For sure.
Okay, so this is one I think we're both going to get a little triggered by this one. Let's touch a little bit. Yeah, let's talk about the importance of investing in operations.
Yes. Woo! I mean, the sirens are going off for us. It's, the lights are spinning and the red and the blue. And oh my gosh, yes. Operations, the most undervalued thing in a business, as far as I'm concerned. Having done this for way too long, it is the thing that anytime I walk into a company, I still have to prove myself. I still have to justify my existence. And I'm just going, okay, well, somebody said this to me and they said, we're like the night cleaning crew, right? You don't know until we're gone. And I like to take that to the next level. And I say, imagine you have a 100,000 person concert and you have people who organize all of this and clean it and do all these different things. And all of a sudden they don't show up. All the logistics, all the clean, all the lighting, everything just doesn't happen. The concert just doesn't happen. All of that orchestration is operations. We're the business orchestrators. We're the ones laying the framework for success operationally with systems and people and data and analytics. It's such a critical piece. And again, I'm talking like we have to prove ourselves because we do. Because we're looked at as a cost center versus as an investment, and an investment that has a high rate of return. If you go and invest into the systems, your rate of return is going to be faster. It's going to be higher. You're going to have happier employees. You're going to have happier clients if you're doing it right. And there's no one right way of doing it. That's the key thing. But if you're doing it in a way that the customer focus is first, and you're looking at things based on the audiences, and operationally, you're laying the processes down and the systems down in a way that support those goals and objectives, you're going to be really good.
Yeah, and I think people don't understand the full breadth of what operations does bring to the table, such as identifying people who are hitting out of the park and seeing how we can repeat and templatize what they're doing, making sure that things are done in an orchestrated way so we actually have the data that everyone's asking for. So when executives are asking for all of these metrics, especially marketing attribution and how marketing is leading to revenue, because they're using so many different systems, it's so critical to invest in a tool that can integrate everything and spit the data out that everybody's asking for. That doesn't happen with spreadsheets. It can't.
And it doesn't happen without seasoned people actually putting these things in.
Yes.
And I think that's a really critical piece. What I see is that companies tend to underhire. And they don't want to spend the money. They think that operations people are very expensive. And the reason that operations people are expensive is we have to know a lot. And we're expected to pivot and change and take systems and customize and to your point, templatizing and doing all these different things in conjunction with all of the other systems that we're doing that with. You know, if you look at a tech stack, I mean, marketing has, I don't know, I think we're up to like 6,000 potential different marketing tools.
I think it's 8, but there's a little bit of replication in there. So we'll settle for 7.
It's an enormous amount for any one person to know. And as an operations person and in growth operations and revenue operations, there are all the integrations that go with it, and knowing the integrations and the touch points and the impact. And what system is the system of record, and how do we report, and where do we report, and what wins? And then taking that and saying to the teams, this is where you want to report from, which usually doesn't happen. Usually the team goes, this is what we're doing. And we're like, but that's not entirely correct, right? Because you're missing these data points because all these systems don't really all talk to each other completely. So, you know, depending on the company size, then you start getting into data warehouses, and then you start getting into blended data, and then you get into stats and, you know, artificial intelligence and all of that stuff. So it then becomes this crazy layer. But I think with operations, the most important thing is you can't scale without it. And if you want to grow a business, then you just hire somebody who hasn't had the experience laying the groundwork to the width that you want your company to go at the trajectory you want them to go. It's very difficult to get there, and if you can even get there. So knowing that, you know, you have to have data governance, you have to have change control process, You have to make sure that people have the right permissions in the system so people aren't doing things they're not supposed to be or making changes, not understanding the impact. Having cadences for rolling out changes in the system, having training and communication and cross communication. People say they'll ask, what do you think the hardest part of this project is going to be? And I'm always like, the change management. 100% of the time in doing this, I've never had it be any different. It's getting everybody on the same page. And that doesn't mean changing their minds about a disagreement. It means educating them. And perhaps there's some mind changing that does happen in there, but that education process is a learning curve. It takes time. You don't just throw a system in front of somebody and say, oh, now you have to know it. No, you have to walk them through just like anything. And the training methods are so important to take the peanut butter and jelly recipe approach, right? The first thing you have to do is what? Have a recipe, right? I like to say that's your requirements and understanding what you're doing, why, your goals and objectives. And then it's getting the recipe ingredients, right? So those are your systems. Those are the talent that you need to have to do these things, right? And the experiences to do these things. And then it's the assembly piece of it, right? And it's taking that plan and those people and those tools and assembling and orchestrating everything. And then there's the rollout piece of it, which is how do we train people? Again, peanut butter and jelly sort of methodology of you've got to go through that entire thing again with the people who are going to be using the tools and explaining them to people, understanding that their retention of information, their common ground understanding is going to be different. And so having training that is built for people who may be a kinesthetic learner more so than they're an audio learner, right? And a visual learner, and understanding how that has to be different. Companies don't really put a whole lot of value into that piece. That's the area where I really see there to be so much potential. And there's tools out there that are really helpful, like WalkMe, where it sits in the tool and you're able to do stuff, but you have to have somebody who knows how to put those pieces in place in WalkMe in order for it to be effective too. So
yeah, I have managed WalkMe quite a few times, and it's really beneficial if you have somebody who can also put together video in addition to the WalkMes, because people like the learn as you go reference what somebody else is doing. You just need to have multiple modalities of training in place. I want to go back to the hiring for a second, because I think this is really, really critical, and we've lived it so many times. I see three big mistakes happening. I see hiring somebody who's completely green to roll out your entire org instead of maybe partnering them with a consultant or investing in their education. I see a lack of investment when it comes to that. I have nothing against people who are new to it, who are enthusiastic and want to learn, but you need to partner them with someone who's experienced, especially if you're doing some kind of implementation or managing a really complex environment. Another mistake I see a lot of time is especially in smaller companies, just trying to hire one person to do all the things.
I'm just going to laugh because that is, we'll get to that. I'll comment on that, but keep going.
Yeah. Yes. So we'll get to that and build on it more. But the third thing I see is that the person who's doing the hiring doesn't have the expertise necessary to really vet the person coming in. And let's face it, in any position, you're going to get a full range of capabilities and qualities. And I've had acquaintances, friends, coworkers bring me in to interview people because they understand that it takes somebody who's kind of walked in those shoes to understand whether or not what the person's telling them makes sense from a process perspective. So let's get on our soapboxes for a couple more minutes.
Yeah, first and foremost, hiring people who either have done the work or coupling them with somebody who has to coach them. I think I totally agree. I mean, if you want to get into this, heck yeah. I mean, come join the party. It's fun. We get to all nerd out together. Woohoo. But it's also, this is here to stay. And it's interesting. I look back on my career and I started out using databases as a paralegal, funny enough, and doing research and all that sort of stuff. Then I did some sales and I did some marketing. I did some accounting stuff and management. All of that time, there was a common thread there. And it was that we needed a customer relationship management system to run things, right? Lo and behold, today, 20 plus years later, CRM is still the middle of it, right?
Yeah.
It's still the heart of it.
Yeah.
We need a way to manage all of this. And when I first started out, I saw this about CRM and said, every company needs this forever. Like, this is never going to go away. The same thing is to say for operations. It's never going to go away. So you need to make the investment. It is a critical piece of your business that if you don't have it, scaling and growing are next to impossible. And if you don't value it, that scale and that growth are going to be so slowed down. And you're going to go, I don't understand why. We can sell the heck out of this product. It's like, but yeah, can you deliver? Can you enable? Can you do renewals? Can you market effectively and keep your brand above water? Because you're addressing these things correctly. And it's thinking across the big picture, the entire customer journey from the back end of the office and the front end of the office and outside of the office. So I think that's really critical. And second, the one I crack up all the time about is, oh yeah, everybody can do everything, right? Except they want one person. It's like, okay, when you go to build a house, do you hire the plumber to do your electricity? Do you hire an electrician to put your windows in? Likely not if you're smart and you don't want your house to fall apart.
Yeah.
So it's the same sort of thing. There's specializations, right? You're going to find that MOPS folks, they're going to, if they're good, they're going to also have the center around customer marketing and maybe a tool like Gainsight or Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics, right? And they're going to probably know some stuff with like an outreach or a sales loft. They're going to have touches with those things, but they may not be experts in them, but they're going to understand the impact that with what they're doing, that's MOPS focus, right?
Right. We're not saying there isn't value in a marketing operations person knowing the CRM, because there absolutely is. It's just too big of a job to expect them to manage both the marketing automation platform and the CRM. They need to know how they work together. They need to know what happens downstream. But there's only so many hours in a day.
Yeah. And that's what I see as companies underhire and understaff, and they burn their people out, and then they have a high rate of revolving doors. My experience in talking to anybody in operations, I think we're at 2 years and we're like spent,
Yeah.
and then a lot of us go off and consult because we've gotten so burnt out. And then in the process, depending on the type of company, but a lot of us have these horror stories, yes, I'm sure, of just not being valued and being asked to boil the ocean. And you come at it with an approach of, I'm not trying to say no to you. I'm trying to say not yet, because these other dependencies are higher priority. They are roadblocks to doing what you're asking, and we can't do them overnight. Somebody said this to me, and I believe this always to be the case. 9 people don't make a baby in a month. And so that's what it comes down to. You can't do it. So some things just take time. And we know even with attribution projects, people are like, I want attribution. I'm like, you know that it takes time to collect trend data, right? Like you need time to do this stuff.
And not only that, but so many companies, there's 2 points of failure. One, the data underneath, and there's some vendors who can help you with that. But ultimately, everyone needs to do work to make sure the processes are in place and the data collection is actually happening. But 2, they don't resource properly. They get excited about this product. They think it's going to fix everything. And they don't have anyone who actually manages and monitors it to get the value out of it.
Well, here's the other thing. When I see that happen, there's a common denominator. They never did requirements gathering.
Yeah.
If they did, they would say, oh, if we want to do these things, the tool can solve these things, but these are the things that are going to happen in order to solve those things, right? Somebody needs to lay out and lead a process discussion and map that out and document it. And that's where all of a sudden they're just going, wait, I don't understand. We can't just plug and play. And you're like, no, you can't.
Yeah, it's either a lack of experience or denial. I think it's a lot of denial. We all want an easy button. Like I want an easy button. That would be great.
I think with the recruitment process, I think it's important that if need be, which usually is a need be, is to hire consultants to help you with your recruiting. And they don't have to be recruiters. They need to be people who can assess the skills and the width of somebody who's coming into an operations role. So I've done a lot of coaching with recruiters of here's what it should look like. I've given them, here are LinkedIn profiles for people you should look to hire, even look at hiring this person, see if you can get them. And this is what it should look like, right? And this is the types of questions to ask. So I have questions that I like to ask too. I'm going to throw these in here because they're pretty funny. I'll ask people about their laundry. And I'll say, are you a do your laundry as you go kind of person, or you do your laundry on just one day a week? Because what I get out of that is the way that they process things. And what I get is, are they going to be more of a data quality person who's going to be running checks and balances and be looking at that every day? Or are they going to say, you know what, I'm going to automate that and switch it up for a job, or I want to get to the point that I'm doing laundry on only Saturdays, or I only want to be doing laundry every day a week so I don't have this big pile on Saturday. It's really interesting what you get out of that question, because what I find with people who do the laundry one day a week is that they can get more focused. And the reason that they can get more focused is that they will find ways to automate things, right? If they're
laughing because I'm totally a 1 day a week person, but I don't know if that might also be a reflection of how many hours we work.
Okay, so that's the other piece of it, right? So then the question becomes, why do you do your laundry 1 day a week, and why do you do it every day? And that really gets to the meat of the way that they process things, because it's going to tell me, is this person who's somebody who is going to be able to be cross-communicative? Are they going to be able to manage other people? Or are they somebody who's an individual contributor? And so the why of it is so important. If they tell me that they do it every day, they're not sure why. I'm like, okay, well, that just tells me that you're probably not ready for management yet, because you always have to explain your why. If they tell me that they do it every day because they have a schedule down for it, I'm like, great. So you understand how to manage your time in a way that allows you to get things done, and you're biting it off instead of just saying like, oh, I can just do this all at once, which is great if you're balancing in a lot of meetings. So that's really great for management, right? If they tell me they do it all on one day and the why is they don't want to be bothered with the rest of the week, I'll say, you don't want to be bothered because you don't have enough time, or you don't want to be bothered because you hate doing laundry. And if they say, well, I think it's better use of my time to do it, then I say, okay, great. So that tells me that they're really good at prioritizing and focusing. If they tell me they just hate doing laundry, and I'm just like, okay, then I go deeper and I ask about, do you hate doing laundry because you don't like the tactical pieces of it? Do you hate it just because it's like that thing you have to do and you don't want to touch it? Because that also tells me that there'll be certain tactical items and operations that I would not put them on. I wouldn't have them doing data quality work because that's laundry. I wouldn't have them cleaning up list views or reports or things like that, in the systems. That's not something that I'm going to put on them. And that doesn't mean that they can't be a manager. It doesn't mean they can't be an individual contributor. It's just going to let me know what are the things how deep they're going to be willing to go on things. And I will tell you, it's been the funnest question to ask, because everyone's like, what the heck? And then they're like, do you want to know what laundry detergent I use? I'm like, no, I really don't.
Yeah, I would never have thought to approach it that way.
It's kind of like, do you take your garbage out? Like, when do you take your garbage out? The laundry, though, is one of those things that you find there is this pretty big line between people who do it 1 day a week and people who do it as they go. Mm-hmm. And then you have the people who don't care. And the really smart people have other people doing their laundry for them.
Yeah, I wish we all could do that. Yeah,
I know. Then I'm like, okay, you're probably an executive at that point because you have no time and you have the money to be able to do that, right?
Yeah, the really interesting question is, if they travel in an RV, how do they handle laundry? Because that's
a good one.
We had to come up with a whole system, and you have to do things in a certain order. It's just really interesting. So
yeah,
but still a 1 day thing.
It gets you into the mindset of how people think. And that, to me, like really gauges what their strengths will be coming in to an operational role. And then it gets into the systems and stuff. I cannot tell you, and I'm sure you're going to laugh at this comment, how often I hear, I am so deep in Salesforce and I'm an expert. And then I'm like, all right, do you know what a permission set is? They have, what's a permission set?
Oh my God, no.
Yes, I get this way too often. I'm an expert in Marketo. Okay. Can you do a list import? No.
How do people get so much confidence is what I want to know. Like,
I don't know. because it is hard, right? And if they can do like two things in there that somebody else can't do, they could be looked to as an expert. So they've been given a false confidence. I don't know. It's kind of mind blowing to me because my assessment, it's so hard to assess people on tools unless you're giving them, I want you to do this and show me how you do this, right? I'm at that point that if I ever do go back stateside as a full-time employee and I'm hiring a team, that I would develop tests for people to take to do things, because it's been the bane of my existence having people come in and they're like, I have my certification. I'm like, I don't care about certifications. I care that you can actually do the work, because I myself, I'm not certified. I don't wear that as a badge of honor, but I sort of do, because I've been in these systems for so long. And I will never tell you that I know everything about them, but I will tell you that there's stuff that I can solve that the vendor can't even solve, you know, and that's just, it is what it is. But I would much rather have somebody who has been running things. They've been running things for a long time. They've been managing people, running things. I would rather hire that person without certifications than put certification as a barrier.
100%. I have worked with a lot of people who tested well and did get certified and didn't understand requirements gathering, digging in to solve the real issue. It didn't look wider to figure out if what they were putting in place impacted other things. It was just, it can be a mess.
The certification tests become a real problem when you've been doing things a long time, because you're like, well, I could do it this way, but I have these other ways I can do it too.
I know. There's 5 ways to do things in every system.
I'm like, none of these answers are actually the right one, because a couple of them you could do with some other things, right? And so it's like, well, so it becomes subjective, right? And I think that's the thing. When the funny thing with people who work in operations is that we are critical thinkers, and we tend to be like artists with problem solving. So for us, solving a problem isn't black and white. We're creative thinkers too. We're creative problem solvers. So we'll come up with, well, I can't do this, but I think I can do this. And if I could get here down this path, then I'd be able to do this too. So, there's a solution. And when you really know things well with the systems and the process, and you understand what the requirements are, I think that's the thing, is you get more seasoned, you know the requirements already, right? You know, I'm trying to solve these problems. Here's what I'm going to need to do that. And you're already from A to Z a lot faster, and you're already sitting there in the design and the process and the architecture and the definitions. And you're like, okay, I just need to lay this stuff down and I'm good to go. But what happens is when people don't have all that seasoning, they end up stuck on what am I trying to solve for again? And so they're limited in their thinking to be able to see, the big picture on how the process really needs to work. And then who needs to be involved in making decisions and who needs to be communicated with about the changes. And that's where things start to fall apart really quick.
Well, and building a business case and getting executive buy-in and knowing how to motivate people without authority, those are all things that are just built over time.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so before we go too far down this path, because I think we could talk about this for hours, let's talk a little bit about a really great example of needing to invest in operations and really focus on what's coming down the pike. And this is something that's already happened, but so many companies haven't prepared for, and that's GDPR. And just because you're in the United States, yes, you do have to start thinking about this, because look at what's happened in California, what's in Virginia, and what's going to happen in New York with New York Shield.
Yeah, GDPR is an interesting one. I cannot tell you how many of these projects I've done. They're complicated, but they're not. It's very templatized, frankly, but it's also the change management, again, hardest part about it. There's a lot of mindset shift on this one. It's, well, why can't we email them and why can't we go and store this, right? Then you're looking at your data integration. So if you're using, a ZoomInfo, a DataFox, whatever it is, you have to look at those vendors. You have to look at what they're doing and how they're getting their data and how you're bringing that data in and utilizing that data and making sure that all those checks and balances are in place. And so many companies, for whatever reason, they're very uncomfortable with that change, but it's absolutely necessary. And, people thought canned spam compliance was hard. This is way harder. I mean, and this is basically, to me, it's really kind of the global way of doing things. It's taking what we did with canned spam and saying, Yeah, there were versions of it in different countries. Now we're saying like, no, this is the global standard, which we totally need. I like that there are countries that are even more hardcore on stuff with sharing data because privacy is everything. I mean, we're so far gone from private these days, and GDPR is like one of the last things that protects us from everybody just getting our data and doing crazy things with it. So yeah, I mean, and then there's the security piece of it. So I think with GDPR, one of the other things that I see is that people have not enough security on the data, not enough security in the systems. They're not doing that as a part of kind of a vendor selection process of doing a deep dive security test on it. And fortunately for me, and I guess a little unfortunately, but I've worked with a lot of cybersecurity companies, and that was one thing that was really huge. And it's one thing that I've been fortunate to learn to bring to my clients and say, hey, you're doing this, but you're actually doing it incorrectly. You need to do it this way. And this is, if you do it this way, GDPR says you can't because you have an open hole here where somebody else could come in and grab this data and they don't even realize it. So GDPR isn't just putting all this stuff in the systems, it's looking at it as a whole and looking at security as well. So I think that's a big piece that gets missed. But the GDPR train has left the station like years ago. It's still surprising to me that I can understand with newer businesses not doing it, but established businesses that have been around for 5 years, 10 years, like you need to get on it because that train has left the station and you have all of this data and you have no accountability on that data without having the measures in place to track all the information that's required. And going backwards on things, as we know, with legacy information is always much harder than going forward.
So I think people, for the most part, I've seen, they understand they need to track where a person's coming from, when they explicitly opted in, date, time stamp. If you're not doing that yet, you should be. What are other big misses you see consistently happening?
Preference centers. So, and what I mean by that is you should have a microsite that is secure, that if you have a case where a salesperson goes and talks to somebody, and I don't want my salespeople checking any boxes about somebody opting in or even opting out. That needs to be automated. And the format for doing that should be sending somebody a link to a microsite, and they need to do it themselves. Like that's really the GDPR thing, is that you as a consumer gets to decide, whether it's on behalf of your business or you as an individual, you get to decide who's contacting you and using your data. And so the microsite with the preferences center that specifically lays out all the different types of communication, because the big miss ends up being that you just opt a mod of everything, which you can do, but give them options to say, hey, we have a newsletter, we have discounts, we have, stuff that's going on new with our products, right? And you're not a customer. All of these different things, and lay it out and explain it. And then give them the option, they can either cherry pick through that or opt out of everything, but not giving them that and assuming that you can still email them a newsletter after they've opted out of an opt-out without having explicitly stated what each of those things are. You can't automatically just say, oh, we've never sent him a newsletter, we can do that now. No, that's not how it works. Even as a customer, that should be a part of the onboarding process, is to send them something along compliance with communications that should be built into a contract for them to go in and digitally sign something that says that they either can have the communications or not for everybody in their company, right? Or they can say we want to opt out and individuals will do it, or neither one of those and just let the individuals decide, but you can start emailing them and let them opt out themselves. So I think that microsite is huge, having it built into contracts for onboarding customers. Those are the things I see miss the most, because you're losing the opportunity then to engage with those people in a meaningful, personalized way. This is how I want to be talked to, right? So I think that those two things right there, that if people went and did that, you're going to get a lot of gain from doing that.
And I think because it looks like we're trending more and more in the direction of this being a global standard, it's also a great excuse to argue for more of an investment in your operations tools. And it's a great segue into opening it up into managing just things that need to be done anyway that can be snuck into that project. So
audit systems and data audits, right? I mean,
Yeah.
what fields are mapped to what fields across what systems, and what are the levels of access with those things, and what systems win. GDPR opens that all up for sure. I absolutely believe that, and agree with you on that, that it is a great segue into that discussion, because it goes down to if you are doing GDPR correctly, you're documenting your processes, you're documenting your systems, your data, who has access to what, who has different levels of permission to the different systems, right? I mean, it really goes into a full scale audit around data and everything. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Melissa. This has been a great conversation. Where can people find you, and how can they sign up for the Growthops community?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. I think I just changed it to like Melissa McCready Growthops or something like that. But if you just look up, I think it's under Melissa Phelps McCready. I'm on there. And then the growthopscommunity.org. There's a sign up for a Slack community. We have newsletters that go out quarterly that are very power packed with a whole bunch of great stuff. And we are always looking for volunteers and for people to come and speak. So by all means, please reach out. My Twitter is kind of and the Growthops community does have a Twitter. We have a LinkedIn group as well. But yeah, there's lots of places that you can find me and find the Growthops community. So looking forward to meet people.
Wonderful. And for those of you looking for more great material like this, go to calibermind.com.